Dairy farming is a quintessential commercial activity. What kinds of dairy products can you think of? Go ahead and take a second and think of some. These are the ones I can think of. Milk, cream, half and half, yogurt, kefir, cheese, cottage cheese, cream cheese, butter, dairy fillers, and processed foods. Let's face it, dairy products are all around us in developed countries. Let's take milk. You probably heard of pasteurization and homogenization. Pasteurization was created by Louis Pasteur in France in the 1800s. What he did was he heated the milk up, and by doing that, you killed off some of the things in the milk, and that allowed the milk to remain for a longer period of time before spoiling. Now, of course, back then, they didn't have refrigeration. Homogenization is about changing the fat molecule a little bit so that the cream doesn't float to the top and then the other stuff float to the bottom. So in other words, so the milk doesn't separate. Ultra pasteurized milk means that it's been cooked for a longer period of time at a higher temperature, and then you really kill off everything. And as a result of that, it can last a lot longer. Now, is pasteurization, ultra pasteurization, is this good for the milk? I mean, part of the thing with milk is that you get stuff that's living in the milk into your gut, which then helps the biota that live in your gut. So increasingly, raw milk is available in the United States, although not in every state. But in California it is. If you go to Sprouts, you can see that they have raw milk. Don't worry, it's tested before it comes to the market. It's just raw. And of course, because of refrigeration, it makes pasteurization probably less important. But I'll let you decide on that. I only drink raw milk. I don't get sick from it. I know somebody who has goats. He only drinks raw milk from the goats, never gets sick from it. Some of you guys may very well have visited family in other countries where they have a cow, and you drink the raw milk, or they drink the raw milk, and nobody gets so sick from it. Now, there are two types of cows, actually. A1 and A2 cows, and they produce A1 and A2 milk. If you look at these pictures, there's both A1 and A2 cows in these pictures. In most developed countries, including the United States, overwhelmingly what we have is A1 cows. So if you look at those pictures, see the cows that look most like the cows that we have in the United States, or that mostly you see in the United States, and then look at the cows that don't look so much like our cows. Well, A2 milk is actually easier to digest for most people because it's more closely related to the original animal that humans began to domesticate that became our modern cow. That thing was called an auroch. Now, there are no more aurochs on the planet. The last one died in 1627 in Poland. But if you look down at the bottom, that's the skeleton of an auroch. And then if you look on the right-hand side, you can see that the left-hand part of that right-hand diagram is aurochs. So we have the bull on the top and then the female, the cow on the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, you can see what those turned into, including the size, how the aurochs are bigger animals in general. And you can see that the bull on the top and then the cow on the bottom. Okay, that's the evolution of those animals because we have changed the animal for our purposes. Now, if you look, which of the animals look like A2 and which ones look like A1? Well, in the photograph on the left-hand side, the two black cows that you see, those are both A1 cows. The white cow is an A2 cow, and you can see how it looks more like those aurochs. The cow on the top right-hand side, yeah, now you probably know that's an A2. And then down at the bottom, there's an A1 and an A2. The brown cow is an A1. The black cow is an A2. One of the ways to distinguish A2s is their rump, their backside, is kind of more curved. They have a bigger hump on their shoulders, and of course they have those horns that kind of more mimic the A2 cow, and they have a slightly elongated face. Now, some people on the planet are lactose intolerant, which means they don't digest dairy products very well. This has to do mostly with the fact that they were not grazing cows over a long period of time and getting used to drinking the cow milk. Of course, humans drink human milk, right? When we're babies, this is what we get. Well, over time, we began to drink the milk of other animals because it was widely available once we began to domesticate those animals. In the places where they didn't do that, and you can see Africa, parts of East Asia and Southeast Asia, and then parts of South America. As a result of that, of course, the cows came into Latin America with the Spanish, but you can see that in Mexico, people got more of it. But in South America, less so. And so the result was that many of these people are lactose intolerant. They don't digest milk very well. 20% of the farming in Europe and Europeanized countries. In other words, Europeanized means countries that have been heavily influenced by Europe, like Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada. 20% of the farming in those types of countries is dairy farming. So 1/5 of all farming is dairy farming in those countries, Europe and Europeanized countries. But developing countries now account for more milk production than developed countries. Why would this be? It's because the developing countries are slowly becoming richer, and then they emulate things from developed countries, which includes consuming dairy products. Why would much of dairy farming be located next to cities, particularly in developed countries? Why do you think that would be? So the area next to the city where the dairy farming goes on is called the milk shed. And this is the area surrounding a city where milk is supplied, and I mean milk in the milk state, not as cheese, because of spoilage. So one of the things about milk is that it can spoil. And so for the farmer and for the seller, the vendor of milk, they want to get that thing on the shelf as quickly as possible in the market. Because by doing that, you have the greatest length of time to be able to sell it before it goes bad. And obviously, transportation is part of what's going to happen with any product when it's coming into a market. And so if you can get it in quickly and it's close by, you have the greatest likelihood of being able to sell it before the milk itself gets bad. I mean, let's face it. If somebody says you go to the store and pick up a gallon of milk, and today is the 1st of November, and you look at the milk and it says October 31st on it, you're not going to buy that milk. And if it says November 2nd, you're probably not going to buy it. You're going to look around and find one that goes out in 2 weeks. Well, everybody's going to do that, and what's going to happen to that milk that's going out? It's going to be tossed, and so they're not going to be able to use it. So you want to get the milk in as quick as possible, and this is the reason that dairy farms are oftentimes located right next to cities, especially in the United States. In Southern California, it used to be Artesia Cerritos La Palma, an area that was once called Dairy Valley. But we know there aren't any dairies there anymore. They've moved out to places like Chino, San Bernardino, Bakersfield, and Tulare. Now, why would that be? Well, there's multiple reasons, not the least of which is as the city grew outward and got close to Artesia Cerritos and La Palma, the land value went up because people were living next to it and it was turning into houses. And in addition to that, feedlots stink. People don't want to be around them because they don't smell nice, especially on hot days. You know, they smell like the cow feces and the cow urine, and of course there's flies and everything else, and people start to complain. And so what do the farmers do? Because their land is increased in value with all the houses around it, they sell the land and then they move out further. People are complaining anyway, and so it gets the farmer away from the consumer. It's kind of a weird cognitive dissonance that happens. There have been changes in the dairy industry over time. Let's take a look at these maps. Look at the one on the left-hand side, milk production 1961, and then milk production 2018 on the right-hand side. And notice that the changes from 1961 to 2018 are not largely happening in Europe and Europeanized countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're happening in other parts of the world, but also notice Africa and part of South America, places where people tend to be lactose intolerant. And now look at milk consumption from 1961 to 2017. And notice, again, the Europeanized countries, not a lot of change, but notice that as you go from the map on the left to the map on the right, that there is increased milk consumption in big chunks of the world. But again, not so much in Africa, in some places in South America, not so much. And then notice East and Southeast Asia, not a lot. They were not places where there were a lot of cattle being grazed historically. But in other places, milk production going up. Look at India. And now look, milk per animal, 1961 to 2018. Now, again, you can see where milk per animal has gone up and where milk per animal has not gone up. The question, though, is about milk per animal. How do you increase the milk production of the animal? 100 years ago, the average cow produced about 6 gallons of milk a day when it was lactating. Now it's 10 gallons of milk per day when it's lactating. How do you do that? Well, you change the animal genetically. The problem is that, of course, this burns the cow out. It's like a machine. If you drive your car 300 miles a day, you are going to burn your car out much quicker than somebody who's only driving 30 miles a day. And the animal works in a very similar way. So is dairy farming intensive or extensive? It's intensive because the animals are kept in feedlots. The food all has to be brought in. You have to very quickly transform that raw product into whatever the processed product is. You have to get it into the market, and the dairy products are kind of expensive. So dairy farming is an intensive agricultural venture.